The wind screamed through the Wyoming basin like a hungry wolf. Snow lashed sideways in great, biting sheets, blinding and unforgiving. The year was 1865, and the frontier had never made promises it didn't intend to break. Martha Langley stood outside the crumbling homestead, her skirts soaked through, her arms wrapped tight around little Eli. He was 5, too small for a world this cruel, and yet his shivering body clung to her with a quiet understanding no child should know. Behind them, the house was dead silent. It hadn't always been that way. Once, this stretch of hard-packed dirt and brittle grass had been her husband William's dream. They'd come west with hope like a flame cupped between their hands. But hope burned out fast under an unrelenting sun and the iron-hard stare of his family, especially when William died. Pneumonia took him after a winter storm just like this. Martha had begged for help, pleaded with his kin, the Langleys of Bitter Creek, hard, flinty people with hearts like the land itself, dry and cracked and given to cruelty. But they'd stood at the edge of their fine stone house, arms folded, faces unmoved. "You ain't blood," old Abigail Langley had said, voice sharp as a hawk's cry. "You was tolerated for William's sake. Now he's gone. So are you." That had been 3 days ago. 3 days since they dragged her and Eli from the house at dawn, shoving a bundle of worn blankets into her arms. No food, no horse, no mercy. "This land don't carry the weak," sneered Caleb Langley, William's brother, mean as a rattler, twice as cold. And now the storm was rising. Martha stumbled to the lean-to where the last of William's tools lay forgotten. A battered axe, a coil of rope stiff with ice. She gathered them like treasures. Her mind worked in jagged fits. There was no time for grief, no room for despair. Eli needed her alive. "Mama, I'm cold," Eli whispered against her. "I know, baby," she breathed, pulling him tighter. "We'll find a way." But already the sky was sinking lower, iron dark and ruthless. The wind cut to the bone. She knew what the Langleys intended. They hadn't needed to pull a trigger. This storm would do their killing for them. And yet, she wouldn't die easy. Not on this cursed soil. She strapped Eli to her back with the rope, bundling him beneath her shawl. His small arms latched around her neck, trusting. Then she turned toward the mountains. Far in the distance, black spires rose from the earth like the backs of slumbering giants, the Wind River Range. If shelter existed, it was there. Snow stung her face raw as she trudged forward. Every step toward her skirts ripped at her boots. Behind them, Bitter Creek vanished beneath the storm's white jaws. Hours blurred. Her legs ached. Her breath burned. But she walked and walked until the sun sank, or maybe it never rose, and darkness swallowed the world. That's when the wolves came. First, their howls floated on the wind, lonely, spine-tingling cries that raised the hair on Martha's neck. Then, shapes slunk from the trees, lean bodies, hungry eyes. They fanned out behind her, pacing. Eli whimpered. Martha didn't run. She couldn't. Running was for fools. Instead, she reached for William's axe, heavy, awkward in her frost-numbed hands. But it was sharp, sharp enough to kill. "Stay back," she rasped to the shadows. "I'll not die quiet." The lead wolf bared its teeth. Then a sound split the storm. A gunshot. Loud. Close. Final. The lead wolf dropped mid-step, its body crumpling to the snow without a sound. Martha spun, heart hammering, expecting death in a new shape. Instead, a figure emerged from the trees. A giant of a man, clad in worn buckskins, snow-caked to his beard and shoulders. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, save for the glint of sharp eyes beneath. Another shot rang out. The second wolf fell. The pack scattered into the dark, yelping. For a moment, there was only the shriek of the wind. Then a man spoke, voice rough as gravel. "You'll freeze out here." Martha stared, clutching Eli tight. "Got nowhere else," she croaked. The man didn't argue, didn't waste words. Instead, he shouldered his rifle and turned. "Come." There was no choice. None at all. Martha followed, through knee-high drifts, past skeletal trees, until at last, through a break in the hills, a cabin appeared. Crude, half swallowed by the woods. Smoke spiraled from its chimney like a lifeline. Inside, the air was thick with pine and old leather. Warmth bled from a stone hearth, casting shadows that danced across rough-hewn walls. Martha fell to her knees, Eli slipping from her back, half asleep. The man shut the door against the storm. He said nothing for a long while, only fed the fire, setting about heating a battered kettle of coffee over the flames. Finally, he looked at her. "You come from Bitter Creek," he said, not a question. She nodded. "Langley's place." Her jaw clenched. Shame warred with fury. "They left us to die." He didn't flinch, didn't look surprised. Sounds like them." Silence stretched. Then he knelt before Eli, not close enough to frighten the boy, and held out a tin cup filled with warm broth. For him. Martha hesitated. Trust didn't come easy. Not anymore. But Eli reached for the cup, hands shaking. Thank you," the boy whispered. The man's face, weathered like split cedar, softened by a hair. Mighty polite for a boy who's seen hell. Martha studied him. This man was no ordinary settler. His cabin was too well hidden. His rifle too well kept. A loner. Maybe a man running from his own ghosts. "Name's Jonas Creed," he said finally. He didn't offer more. Didn't need to. Martha gathered Eli close, warmth seeping back into her frozen limbs. But sleep would not come. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, shadows stretched long. Jonas Creed sat by the fire, whittling a piece of wood. His eyes, sharp as flint, never left the window. Martha understood. The frontier wasn't safe, and men like Creed didn't survive by chance. When morning bled gray across the mountains, the storm had passed, but danger had not. Creed stood at the door, rifle in hand. "You best tell me everything," he said, "before the past catches us both." Martha hesitated, then the words spilled like floodwater. The marriage, the loss, the betrayal, the Langley's cruelty. Creed listened, silent, unmoving, until she finished. Then he spat into the fire. Typical Bitter Creek rot. He turned, voice low. "They think you're dead. That gives you an edge." Her heart twisted. "But I can't run forever." Creed's gaze darkened. "No, you can't." He stepped closer, not unkind, but hard like mountain stone. "You want to live? You learn to fight." Martha's spine stiffened. "I'll do what I must." His grim smile was approval enough. "Good. The land respects strength. Nothing else." And in that moment, beneath the shadow of death, of wolves, of betrayal, something shifted inside her. The woman who'd been Martha Langley, the grieving widow, the cast-out wife, was dying. And something new was rising to take her place. A survivor, a mother with iron in her bones. Outside, Bitter Creek waited, and so did vengeance. But first, there was a world to learn, a child to protect, a life to reclaim, and a man named Jonas Creed, carved from wilderness and scars, who might just teach her how. If the land didn't kill them first. The fire crackled, the wind moaned, and far, far away, at the edge of memory, the Langleys raised their glasses, thinking her buried beneath the snow. They were wrong, dead wrong. The wind clawed at her like a starving wolf. Anna staggered forward, her arms wrapped tight around little Eli, whose thin body shivered against her chest. The bare skeletons of pine, trees, loomed overhead, creaking like gallows in the night. Snow drifted down in a silence that felt like judgment. Every step was harder than the last. The boy had gone quiet hours ago, lips blue, eyes sunken in his thin face. Anna didn't know if he slept or drifted on the edge of something colder. Her skirts were stiff with frozen mud and blood, not all of it hers. Days ago, when her husband's kin had left them to die like dogs near the ravine, Anna had thought she'd cursed God for the last time. But trudging alone through wilderness sharpened a woman's fury into something leaner than grief, something like teeth. When her knees buckled, she stayed down longer than she meant to. Snow piled over them both. Her breath came ragged, bitter as iron on the wind. "Lord," she whispered hoarsely, lips numb, "if you see us now, don't let him die for their sins." A sound broke the hush, not the whisper of trees or the wind's low howl, but a sharper noise. the crack of a rifle being cocked. Her body stiffened. Fear clawed through exhaustion. Slowly, Anna raised her head. A man stood on the edge of the woods, shadowed beneath a brimmed hat. Wrapped in a rough buffalo hide coat, he looked carved from stone in solitude. His rifle never wavered. What fool woman dragged a half-dead young un through a patchy country? His voice was dry, cut with gravel. Anna's heart pounded. She forced herself upright, shielding Eli with her arms. I ain't here to steal. We're lost. He looked at her like a man staring at a wounded animal too broken to put down. He spat into the snow. Lost don't matter out here. Only dead or alive. The rifle lowered, not out of kindness, but calculation. The man's eyes were cold slate, taking measure of her weakness, her desperation. He turned without a word and walked away. Anna's mouth opened in shock. Was he leaving them? But after 10 paces he stopped. Look back once. You coming, or is that boy your grave? It wasn't mercy. It was something harder, a test. Anna struggled upright, lifting Eli with what strength she had left. Her legs shook beneath her. She followed. The settler led them through a narrow cut in the trees, up a steep incline where the wind screamed between crags of stone. The land itself seemed built to turn away trespassers. When they reached a rough-hewn cabin pressed into the rock face, Anna nearly wept, not from relief, but because it looked so bitter, so lonely, she knew it would swallow them whole. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, tanned hides, and cedar sap. Sparse. Tools hung on the walls, snares, knives, traps. No softness, no welcome. The man built a fire with practiced economy. When Anna laid Eli near it, he knelt beside the boy. He's burning up. I know. Got a fever deeper than a rattler bite. How long since he's eaten? 2 days. He grunted. From a shelf, he fetched a tin mug, poured in water, added something dark from a small leather pouch. Yarrow. Won't fix much, but might drag him from death's edge if he wants to live bad enough. Anna took it, cradling Eli's head, coaxing a few drops past his chapped lips. The man watched without comment. When he finally spoke, it was quiet. Name's Boone. Anna's throat worked. Her voice felt like ash. Anna Garrett. His eyes flicked to the ring still on her finger. No curiosity, just understanding that cut deeper than words. Widow. Abandoned. Boone sat back on his heels. There was no surprise in him, only the hard ledger of a man who'd seen cruelty baked into men like sun into stone. They leave you with nothing? Left me with a son. That's all I needed. A long silence passed between them. The fire snapped. You won't last out here. Not with the boy sick and no food. I didn't ask for charity. His mouth twitched. Not humor, but approval. Didn't offer it. That night, Anna stayed awake while Eli slept fitfully. Calder moved around the cabin like a ghost, tending to traps, cleaning a rifle worn smooth by years of toil. She studied him, the set of his shoulders, the way he moved like a man long and used to company. A man more comfortable with wolves than with words. Days passed in a rhythm sharp as survival. Calder fed them sparingly, rabbit broth, bitter wild greens, water that tasted of metal and pine roots. He spoke little. When he did, it was to issue instructions. Snow'll come heavy tonight. Chop wood. Water south by the gorge. Watch for mountain cats. Anna obeyed, not out of fear, but because she saw in him the shape of the land itself. Unforgiving, unmoved by weakness. Eli's fever broke after 3 days. His eyes cleared, skin pale, but no longer waxen. Anna wept silent tears when he whispered, Mama, I'm hungry. It was the sweetest sound she'd ever heard. That night, while Eli slept curled against her, Calder sat by the fire, sharpening a knife. What you plan to do when spring thaws this land? His tone gave nothing away. Anna's jaw tightened. Find a place. Build something for him. Away from them. Men who leave a woman and child to die don't leave loose ends. Her stomach turned. The truth of it sank into her bones. They'll come. He nodded once. You need to learn to fight. Anna stared at him. Her fingers curled over Eli's thin shoulder. I'll do what I must. That was the moment Boone looked at her with something like respect. The next day began her lessons. He taught her how to snare rabbits with a loop of gut string, how to strike flint until the spark caught, even in damp wood, how to gut fish, set traps, load a rifle without fumbling like a town-bred fool. Her hands blistered, her muscles ached, but each failure burned pride into iron. Again, he'd bark when she missed, quicker when she fumbled. She began to watch him with different eyes, not as a savior, but as a man carved from scars not unlike her own. At night, while Eli slept, Calder would sit by the fire, whittling wood into shapes no one would ever see but him. Anna ventured a question once. Why live out here alone? He didn't look up. Had a family once. Wife. Boy. The silence stretched like a noose. They gone. Disease took him. Town wouldn't help. Closed their doors for fear of sickness. Anna's throat tightened. I'm sorry. He shrugged. Sorry don't change the past. Only thing left is what a man chooses after. His words sat heavy in her chest. Weeks passed. The snow lessened. The air carried a sharp, wet smell of thawing earth. But with the thaw came danger. Tracks in the snow, boot prints too large for Calder's. He crouched near them, eyes dark. Riders. Maybe 3, maybe more. Anna's blood chilled. They're coming. Calder rose, checking his rifle. They'll find nothing easy here. Anna squared her shoulders. I'll fight. He looked at her, not like a burden, but like an equal. You'll need this. He handed her a small, sharp knife, its handle worn smooth. For cutting rope, or throats. She didn't flinch. That night, as they waited in the cabin, Calder spoke low. You got well enough, Anna Garrett, but we'll need steel. She nodded once. I found both. Dawn came cold and gray. Hoofbeats echoed through the valley. Anna stood beside Calder Boone. Widow no longer helpless, mother no longer running, a woman tempered by frost and fire. Whatever came next, blood, death, survival, she knew this. She would never be left to die again. And if the men who cast her out thought they'd find an easy grave for her and her son, they were about to learn the frontier held harder souls than their own. Souls shaped like Calder Boone, souls shaped like hers. The dawn broke cold and sharp over the Wyoming frontier, casting long blue shadows across the rise where Ruth Tanner stood, alone but no longer hollow. Behind her, their rough cabins still bore the scars of winter and siege. Inside, little Eli slept curled beneath a quilt sewn from scraps of loss and stubborn hope. And near the splintered fence, the man who had changed everything, Abram Cain, drove a spade into the frozen earth with a quiet steadiness that both comforted and unsettled her. Ruth watched him longer than she ought. A month passed. He had been no more than a ghost in these hills, the reclusive settler, scar-faced and wary, shunning the world. But the world had come to them regardless, in the form of her wicked in-laws, desperate for what little land and dignity she had left. They'd failed to kill her once. She knew they'd return. She stepped down from the rise, her boots crunching through frost-bitten grass. Abram looked up, eyes shadowed beneath the broad brim of his battered hat. His voice was low, roughened by years alone. Tracks by the creek. Horses. Her stomach turned to stone. Them. Likely. He didn't sugar words. Ruth clenched her jaw. The feud hadn't ended when she'd clawed her way through hunger, when Abram had pulled her and Eli back from death's door. No, men like Silas Boone, her dead husband's brother, didn't forget an insult, and surviving had become the gravest insult of all. They'll come tonight, Abram said simply. Ruth met his gaze. Once she would have quailed. Now, she squared her shoulders. Then we'll be ready. That night came on black and still, the wind barely breathing through brittle pine. Abram worked in grim silence, checking rifle sights, setting snares in the brush line, placing lanterns where their light could be snuffed quick. Inside, Ruth braided Eli's hair back from his sleeping face, her hand lingering over the bruise still fading from his temple. She whispered a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. Then came a sound. Horse hooves. Deliberate. Slow. Her blood iced over. Abram stood near the door, Henry rifle cradled in his arms like an old friend. His scar tugged down one side of his mouth. Not quite a scowl, not quite a grin. He caught her eye. You stay with the boy. Last line's yours if they breach. Ruth bristled. She wasn't the same woman Silas had tried to bury. She was flint now, all sharp edges. But she nodded. Outside, voices curled like smoke. Cain, we know you're holed up with her. Ain't no sense in dying over Boone trash. Silas. Ruth's heart thrummed like a war drum. Abram stepped onto the porch, rifle steady. Ain't dying tonight. Not by your hand. A low chuckle from a dark. Funny. Your kind always dies for nothing in the end. Abram didn't flinch. Might be, but you'll bleed before me. And then it began. Gunfire cracked the stillness like lightning ripping the sky. Lantern light flared and died. Bullets chewed into the rough cabin walls. Ruth pressed Eli close, teeth clenched, pulse roaring in her ears. Abram moved like a wolf among sheep, silent, lethal. Ruth caught glimpses through the chinks in the wall, his broad shoulders disappearing behind a tree, reappearing in the firelit chaos to fire clean, deliberate shots. One of Silas's men fell screaming. Another dropped face first into snow blackened with blood. But there were too many. She felt the cabin shudder as men shouldered against the door. Her time had come. She shoved Eli beneath the bed, kissed his tear-wet cheek hard enough to brand memory into him. Stay down, no matter what. Then she turned to face the storm. The door crashed inward. Silas Boone stood framed in the wreckage, his long face twisted in a sneer she'd known too well in her years of suffering. Behind him loomed his cousin Jed, thick-necked, eyes burning with liquor and violence. Well, Silas drawled. Widow Tanner, still breathing it. Ruth lifted the shotgun Abram had left in her care. It shook, but only slightly. Silas laughed. Think that pea shooter scares me? Should have stayed dead like your husband. She fired. The blast caught Jed square in the gut, folding him like a punctured bellows. He went down bellowing, blood dark against the floorboards. Silas roared and rushed her. They collided hard. Ruth's back slammed against the wall, the shotgun torn from her grasp. His hands clamped like iron around her throat. You worthless sow, he hissed, spittle flecking her face. Cost me land. Cost me pride. Her vision blurred. The world narrowed. Then came the crack of a rifle, deafening in the closed space. Silas stiffened. Behind him stood Abram Cain, his face carved from stone, rifle barrel smoking. Silas sagged forward, gurgling his last curse into the dust at Ruth's feet. It was over, or so it seemed. The dawn was blood-washed and raw. Ruth sat on the steps of the battered cabin, Eli pressed to her side. Abram stood a few feet away, staring out over the silent clearing littered with the dead. Neither spoke for a long time. At last, Ruth found her voice, ragged but steady. You didn't have to stay. Could have left us to fend. Abram's scarred face turned toward her, his eyes, so long shuttered, softer than she'd ever seen. Could have, he agreed. But I reckon I'd been dead long before if I hadn't stayed. The words hit her harder than any blow. She understood him now, understood the ache of loss that had driven him to solitude, to bury his heart alongside whatever ghosts haunted him. She rose, crossed the frozen earth, stood before him. You saved us. You saved me. He looked down at her, a man rough-hewn from wilderness, shaped by sorrow. And slowly, carefully, he reached for her hand. I reckon you saved me too, Ruth Tanner. It wasn't a promise, spoken in grand words or gilded dreams. It was something truer, a fragile beginning, a love forged not in fair weather, but in fire and blood and survival. Later, when the dead were buried and the land breathed easier, Ruth would build a life here not as a widow clinging to the past, but as a woman reborn from hardship, with a man who knew the language of silence, of scars, of second chances. And long after their story passed into whispers around frontier campfires, folks would say this, that the wild had nearly broken them, but the wild had also made them whole. Because the frontier wasn't just a place. It was a test of will, and some hearts, battered though they be, were made for it.